Your life is a sum total of every choice that you've made.
Brendon Watt is a world-class speaker, best-selling author, and facilitator for the global empowerment company, Access Consciousness.
Your point of view creates your reality. Reality doesn't create your point of view.
After a lifetime of alcoholism brought him to his knees, he chose to stop looking outside of himself and turned his focus inward.
You know, I'd spent my life looking for an answer. Just tell me what to do. Tell me how to live. Tell me how to get my life right. There must be a right path to take. But that was all about more judgment. It was never about freedom.
What's up, everybody? My name's Dan, podcaster, keynote speaker, advocate, and I am joined in studio by my wife, Donna Gilchrist, and this is Hard Knocks Talks, your addictions podcast. Shout out to the Saskatchewan Safety Council for inviting me to speak about preventative measures, support, and intervention for people who use substances at work at their annual Saskatchewan Safety Seminar, February 6th to 8th, 2024. Now, let's get into our conversation with Brendon Watt. What's up, Brendon? How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Yes, you're very welcome. Is there anything that you'd like to say before we jump in?
Oh, no, let's do it.
Let's go.
This is Hard Knocks Talks.
So, Brendon, things really went sideways for you during COVID, as they did for so many others. But of course, with so many others, it starts way before that. Why don't you tell us how it got started, how your life with alcohol got started?
I think I was about 13 when I had my first drink, and I was with my older sister and some of her friends, and I remember just being like, something, I knew straight away something was different with me. You know, everyone would have a couple of drinks and then want to go and do something, and I was like, where's more alcohol? You know, I was always looking for more. So it kind of it began then, but I would say even throughout my 20s, it was more of a, you know, I would drink on the weekends and go way over the top, but then I'd stop. You know, it wasn't this craving and this need for it. That came later. That was probably probably still the last 10 years where I was really like, man, I just can't stop. But I did not want anyone to know about that. There was a big secret.
Why was it such a big secret?
I just had such a wrongness with it, you know, and the shame that went along with it. I remember I was actually in Costa Rica once, and I'd just been, you know, partying, drinking, and I got back to Australia and I was really sick. And I went to the doctors and he ran some tests and he was like, let me ask you this, how much do you drink? And I was like, oh, you know, like just a bit on the weekends and stuff like that. And he said,
And then during the
you
week
have,
too.
yeah, and then whenever I can. But he was like, you have basically the early stages of degenerate liver. And that to me was like horrifying. I went and got more tests. And even at that point, it was, okay, so I'll cut back. But the idea of never having alcohol again for me was terrifying.
And how
It
old were you
was
at that
like,
time?
at that point, I would have been maybe 35.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
Mhm.
young.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it was when COVID hit that it got really bad. And I remember talking to a friend of mine, and he brought up the word alcoholic, and that was,
Swear word.
I couldn't even hear it. Swear word. I had so much judgment of it. And one of the things I was really grateful for was he asked me some questions with it. He was like, well, what does it mean to you? What does that word mean to you? And I was like, stuff came up about my father, stuff came up about it just being a weakness and the biggest wrongness, and which was basically creating the way that I saw myself around this whole thing. And I got the big book, I got the AA big book, and I was like, I don't want, like, I was doing it more just, if I read this, then I'm going to be fixed. And, you know, I'll just read the big book, then I'm going to be fixed. And you know, the chapter on the doctor's opinion, and I was like, man, that's me. And what are you saying, that I can't drink anymore? Like, seriously?
So now you're mad at the book now?
I'm mad at everything. I
Yeah.
was like, you know, we were talking before this, and I was like, I had a session with this lady, and she's like, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to manage this? Do you want to, like, actually quit? Do you want to live? Do you want to create your life? And I was like, at that point, basically, I want to figure out how I can keep doing this and not
Mm,
have the destruction along with it.
mm. So you mentioned when the word alcoholic was presented to you, your thoughts of your dad came up. Like, unpack that a little bit for us. Did you grow up around alcoholism?
Yeah, I grew up, well, yeah, my dad and my grandfather, two of the men that I was around most in my really younger years, probably until the age of like 7 or 8.
Mm,
And they were both really abusive as well. There was a lot of physical abuse, there was sexual abuse, there was just, it was not pretty. So the word like alcoholic, I related to that. I had that in this box of, well, in order to be an alcoholic, you either need to be living under a bridge or you need to be this abusive, narcissistic person. So
mm-hmm,
putting myself in that category was like, wait a minute, like, so I had all these judgments of it, which were a lot of the things keeping me stuck in not even wanting to look at it.
mm. So when you look back now, typically we drink because we're trying to either achieve something or run away from something. Would you agree?
I would say run away from something, definitely.
Looking at,
Yeah.
like, did you realize that you were running at the time, or looking back now, like, what was it?
Looking back now, I think I realized a lot more than I wanted to know I realized, and
Mm,
for me, it was running away from myself my whole life. I was always uncomfortable in my own skin. Like
mm-hmm,
to be on my own and to be just comfortable with myself was never a thing. Like I was always looking for validation, someone validate me, someone, tell me that I'm good at something, or tell me that you like me, or tell me that you love me, so that I know that I'm fitting in or I'm doing the right thing. So it was, for me, you know I just, one of the things I learned about alcoholism is basically from the beginning, like when you really start using it as that thing to run away from something or deal with something, you kind of stop you stop your ability to have any social response or social skills also.
mm-hmm,
So for me, it's kind of like, you're a grown man, but you kind of feel like a kid trapped in there going, still all twisted up in it. So there was no space. And I knew that for me, I knew that dealing with it, like I knew if I was actually gonna tackle sobriety, like really have a go at it, it wasn't gonna be easy. And that was the thing, that there was gonna be parts of me I'd have to look at that just terrified me.
when you were trying to be away from yourself, you didn't like yourself, you were trying to avoid yourself. Do you think that that maybe spurred from the way you were treated growing up by your father and by your grandfather? And while we're there, and we don't need to talk on this right now, but I would like to talk, you haven't mentioned your mother yet.
So even in that, like I've in finding so one of the things I found uh that really was very helpful was access consciousness 30 when I was 30, so 13 years ago. And one of the first tools I got was this tool called Who Does It Belong To, which is
Mm,
basically 98% of your thoughts, your feelings, and your emotions don't actually belong to you. You just pick them up from,
yeah.
everyone around you. And I was like, I heard that and I was like, whoa, because I was so confused with in early years in life where I'd be like, I'd have this sense of me, and then all of a sudden it would be gone, and I'd be struggling. And I never realized that I had a lot of awareness, like a lot of us do. We're never really acknowledged for, hey, what are you actually aware of with this? Like, what are
Yeah.
you, we never really asked questions and things like that. Well, I definitely wasn't. So it was
Mm-hmm.
always, in starting to learn different things about that, I could start kind of piecing different things together and go, like, even now, I'll react a certain way and I'll be like, who am I being with that? Like, what is that? What am I
Yeah.
trying to accomplish here? What is this? And I'll be like, wow, that is just not me at all. That's, my mother, my father,
Mm-hmm. Maybe let's take a step back and talk about that. Do you think that that might be where some of this started for you?
Yeah, different ways of coping, like in creating, coping mechanisms to deal with different things. They
Hmm.
definitely, stayed in there throughout my life. I'd react in certain ways, and that always kind of confused me with why am I choosing this? Like, I would always be curious about why does someone else have ease with this, and why am I not having ease with this?
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I would say all of it, played a part with it. But one of the things I realized many years ago, and I was actually at a seminar when I heard Gary Douglas, the founder of Access Consciousness, he was talking about choice. And he said, your life is a sum total of every choice that you've made. And one of my things that was I'd gotten so good at was being a victim. I have no money because I grew up poor. I'm not happy because I've, had all this abuse, and I can't create a relationship that works because of I had an excuse for everything. Which when I realized that, I was like, man, my life is not going to change if I keep doing this. So when I realized that, I started to look at, okay, I need to start making different choices here.
So you continued to try to manage, right? Like there was an attempt, like every day you would wake up and say today's going to be different, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So
Yep.
what finally brought it to a head then? What finally brought you into recovery?
Basically, a 12-day bender that I don't even remember much of. It was
Yeah.
it was full on, and then that was it. That was my last
Hmm.
hurrah. That was, kind of, man. It was not pretty.
Tell us about your first few months. In did you go running back to the rooms again, or what did that look like?
I'd lost pretty much everything. My relationship was destroyed. My career was destroyed. That 12 days had just been like a bomb had gone off in my world and the world with everything. And I got home, and that was when I was like, I knew that I basically had two choices at that point, was to keep drinking and I'd be dead, or something worse within the next, few months, or I was going to have to go through what I was really not wanting to go through. And I was actually on the phone I had one bottle of wine when I got home,
Hmm.
and I was on the phone to a rehab clinic in Florida, and I was talking to this guy who was so sweet, and he could hear in my voice like I was a mess, and he was like, okay, look, you need medical detox, and you need to get yourself into a clinic and stuff like that, and I was just sitting there, a wreck, talking to this guy, and I actually got off the phone to him and went to buy another bottle of wine, and the liquor store had just closed, and I stood outside there, and I was like, okay, Whole Foods is across the road. I could walk across there and get another bottle of wine, and something just it was just a moment of clarity that I hadn't had before, and I just went, I'm done. And that's
Hmm.
when I walked home, and the next morning showed up at the 11 a.m. meeting, and it was on, and it was that's when it began. And I think I was doing 3 or 4 meetings a day for the first 3 months, and in every one of those meetings I was, called upon to talk, and I just would sob. It was like I just, so much came out of me that I hadn't spoken about, that I hadn't given myself the space to just go, you know what, I hate myself. I hate who I
Hmm.
am. I hate what I've chosen. And I've so many things that I just had so much pain with still,
Hmm.
so many things that I just hadn't dealt with.
Did it help you breathe?
Yeah, and yeah, it did, and it
Yeah.
was it was hard. Like I remember having a conversation with the same man, my boss at the time, who was really like a mentor to me as well. And he said, "Look, he said, I can't help you with this. You're going to have to do this." And
Hmm.
he said, "This is going to be the hardest thing that you've ever had to do." And I was like, I I, I kind of knew it at the time, but I don't think I realized just how hard it would be in those
Hmm.
first few months. Like I I was really looking at, okay, do I even want to live? Like, do I really want to be here?
Hmm. You think you were drinking to die?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. And y- that was not an easy thing to look at, like to
Yeah.
in like if you let the evidence of it speak for itself, in looking at that 12 days, there was nothing in that that would say that I didn't want to, even though I wasn't cognitively going, you know what, I want to die, I'm going to drink myself to death.
Yeah.
There was a much bigger, there was a lot more to it than that, that it was just like, yeah, somewhere I wanted out. I
So
didn't
it
want to deal
wasn't,
with any of it.
maybe it wasn't you wanted to die. Maybe you just didn't want to live.
How I think, yeah,
I don't know
yeah,
if that
I
makes
think I
sense or
didn't
not.
want to live. And well, I think it does,
Mm-hmm.
because it's
Yeah.
like
It does. I've been there.
to,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
in knowing now, like to have one of the things I'm grateful for, like really, and have more and more great gratitude for all the time is there's nowhere to hide, and it's still, I'm almost a couple of years in, it's uncomfortable a lot, but it's like there's nowhere to go. All right,
Yeah.
time to check out. It's
Yeah.
like, all
Yeah.
right, what, it's here.
Mm-hmm. Got a comment coming in here.
Our dear friend Onyx, enlightened as usual, says just a thought: 12 days to hit bottom and 12 months to surrender to your healing. Angel numbers 1212, God, spirituality, higher self awareness.
Mhm.
Cool.
Yes.
So speaking of spirituality, things of that nature, it sounds to me like you bought into the program. Is that accurate?
A lot of the things that I looked at with spirituality, like throughout my years, was more about an answer. It was more about, here we got the right answer, and here's what spirituality is. And
Mm.
I didn't see much out there about question and what's your awareness, and and actually talking about consciousness from more of a level of empowerment, and what do you know about what's true for you with this? And I think for me, that was one of the big things driving my addiction, was I didn't want to look at what was true for me. I wanted to
Mm.
look at fitting in. I wanted to look at creating a life that didn't stand out too much, that didn't ruffle feathers, and
Mm.
and do all of that. So, one of the we have a definition of consciousness in with access, and it's where everyone and everything is included, and no one and nothing is judged. And the
Mm.
thing that really got me in the beginning was it was about empowering you to know what you know. So everything was about beginning with a question, and I
Mm.
was like, what that I would know? I'd spent my life looking for an answer. Just tell me what to do. Tell me how to live. Tell me how to get my life right.
Uh-huh.
There must be a right path to take. But that was all about more judgment. It was never about freedom.
Mm. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
Um. I.
You just blew Dan's mind. He's speechless for the first time in his life.
So,
Kudos.
yeah, there you go. To episode 247, Dan finally ran out of shit to say.
We did it. Okay, good.
Yay! Okay. What was your first experience with that? What was your first absolute truth that kind of blew your mind and sort of maybe changed your direct trajectory?
So I was 29, and I'd just gotten out of this long-term relationship with my son's mother. I had a 4-year-old kid. I was sharing this tiny bedroom at my mother's house with this little guy, and I hated myself. I hated my life, and that was another point where I just wanted out. And I one day I just was like, basically begged the universe. I was like, if there's anything out there listening to me, I need help. I don't want to be here anymore. I don't know how to be a dad. I don't want to live. I hate my life. I hate myself. And I found the next day, I found this little ad in the newspaper that said, all of life comes to me with ease and joy and glory, and this girl's name and her phone number. And I called this girl and she said, okay, I do this thing called the access bars, and basically it's 32 points on the head, and when lightly touched, it dissipates all your considerations, beliefs, judgments, and so on that you have on these certain things. And she was like, at best case, your whole life will change, and at worst case, it'll be like you've had a great massage. And I was like, okay, it was just I was like, I need to go and see this girl, and I went and saw her, and I got this session with her, and for an hour and a half, she asked me some questions, and I just laid there and sobbed. But after it, I was like, it was the first sense of space that I'd had in my world since I was a little kid. I had this lightness in my world, and I was like, holy shit. So I started getting these sessions and learning about access, learning about these different tools, and I everything that was being spoken about with empowerment, with question being the source for awareness, like actually being in question, not looking for an answer, but actually allowing your knowing to be there. Like one of the in the beginning, learning about you know being an infinite being, and not just this you know solid creature in a body who doesn't like themselves, but what do you know as a being? And I was like, what? And I just started opening up to different things, and it was interesting because we talk about in access the four elements of being infinite being, knowing, perceiving, and receiving, while the lower harmonics of that being thoughts, feelings, emotions, and another one. But I was like, oh man, like I'd always use thinking as something to try and create, but I was like, I'm always stuck in my head with things.
Mm,
When I learned to ask, okay, what do I actually know about this? What I started finding was just different kind of, um, I don't know, call it different pieces of the puzzle. But learning things like that, like I think we can all relate to it with which one's quicker, knowing or thinking. And you go, oh shit, like I look back at my life and I'm like, and I've made countless choices where I knew they weren't going to work out. On some level, I knew. And I think
yeah.
we all do. We go, this isn't going to work, but I'm going to choose it anyway because it validates some point of view that we have about ourselves.
Mm. So give us an example then. You talk about instead of bringing the question, bringing your knowing into it. Like, how do you bring your knowing into any, say, given situation? Give us an example of this.
If you began everything with a question, like anything that you're approaching with, I wonder what's possible with this that I've never considered, then for me, like if like even before this interview, I asked that question, what's possible with this interview that I've never considered? I'm not, in the past, I would try and map it out. What am I going to talk about? How am I going to show up? How am I going to be seen? How am I going to be? But that thing of like they talk about in the 12 steps of like actually surrendering, trusting that you're going to know in each moment what to choose. What I'd done and what I see a lot of people do is as soon as you come to any conclusion, nothing can come into your world that doesn't match it. So if you've got the point of view that life's hard, life is hard. If you've got the point of view you can't give up drinking, you're not giving up drinking. If you've got the point of view that you're a terrible person, then you seek out everything that validates that point of view.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm grateful for is with that, like even a question of, for me, one of the things, probably the first 6 months of my sobriety, like I was sober and I was working my ass off with it, but I was so stuck in that 12 days still. I just couldn't seem to get any freedom from the why. Like, why would anyone with the life that I had do that? And I couldn't answer that question. I was keeping myself in a roundabout trying to figure out why,
Mm-hmm.
until I stood back and I went, okay, question, which is, you think I would know this, but um, So I stood back and took a different perspective and started questioning it and going, okay, what's the gift in this?
Hmm.
What's the gift in this that I'm not acknowledging? And from that space, I could look at it different and be like, wow, well, without this, I wouldn't be sober. Without this, I wouldn't have me to the degree that I have me right now. Without this, I wouldn't be looking at all of this stuff. I wouldn't be working on me. Without this, I wouldn't be able to be a contribution in the world with it.
Hmm.
And that was the thing that started setting me free of that. So I say that because, man, I did not want to ask that question. Like, who wants to look at what's the gift in this when you've just blown your life up?
Well, and
Or who
you
wants
don't know
to,
how to look at gifts. You only know how to
yeah,
look at misery, and you only know how
yeah,
to
and
consider misery.
yeah. Well, once again, it's interesting that you say that because, like I said before, that the energy of abuse and different things like that were much more familiar to me. Well, so
Hmm.
was misery. So gratitude, like having gratitude for something and actually being able to see something as a gift, so foreign.
Hmm.
So it's but see, like I said, with that, come to a conclusion or have a point of view about something, and nothing can come in that doesn't match it. Is when you're not grateful for yourself, or when you can't see yourself as a gift, it's a little hard to see anything else as a gift. Nothing registers. All you see is misery.
Hmm.
So another, awareness from access is your point of view creates your reality. Reality doesn't create your point of view. So,
Hmm.
Hmm. I've heard that
you know,
before. That's
it's, and that's just where it's at. It's like for me now, one of the things I ask all the time is how many points of view can I let go of that would change all of this? Because if I look at, I said that thing before about choice and realizing, wow, I've chosen this life. Like I could blame alcoholism on my upbringing. I could
Yeah.
blame alcoholism, or I could blame any of that. I could give you thousands of excuses. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to get free of it if I look at it like that. I'm going to remain a victim. This might ruffle some feathers and stuff, but I've read a lot of different things where people are really looking at the disease of it, and also the different things throughout childhood as being the source for it, rather than looking at somewhere in there I had choice. And so
Yeah.
for me, I really looked at, even with the allergy to alcohol, I went, okay, so if everything's a choice, somewhere along the line I've chosen that too. What I'm trying to get to with it is, this is where all the power
Mm.
is if you can recognize that you've chosen it, then you can make a different choice and you have the power. And I love AA. I'm so grateful for it. Like really am. It's without it, I wouldn't be sober. There's no,
Yeah.
I, such a gift to me. But what I one of the things that kind of didn't really work for me, or I see could have been expanded upon, was you are powerless when it comes to alcohol, and my life had become unmanageable without a doubt.
Mm. Mm.
But you are powerful beyond that,
Yeah.
where let's access that power. And for
Well,
me, what I see that power is choice.
and when we talk about powerlessness, I feel like maybe something gets lost in translation
mm,
with that, like saying that I'm powerless over alcohol, saying like, oh, okay, if alcohol is sitting here, it's going to tell me to go and do horrible things, and I'm just going to do that. I think where I'm at with that is like, I'm powerless that alcohol exists in this world. It is here. I cannot make it go away, but I do have a choice. I can pick the bottle up or I
Yeah,
cannot pick the bottle up. That's where
yeah.
my definition of powerlessness comes from.
Let me give you another awareness of, or a tool that we got in access is, what's true for you will always make you lighter. This is a law of the universe. What's true for
Mm.
you will always make you lighter, and what's not true for you, or what's a lie, will always make you heavier. So for me, in navigating my life and creating my life, it was, and what I see for a lot of us, it was more done from judgment. How do I be right? How do I be not wrong? So you're kind of navigating with this is where you're kind of navigating with not what's true for you, you're navigating with judgment. And so if we look at, say, surrendering to a power greater than you or a higher power, is for me, I was like, man, that was one of the big keys and still is today, is surrendering to like oneness, surrendering to consciousness and recognizing that something like that is not going to lead you astray. It's the personalities we create ourselves as,
Mm-hmm.
the the rightness, the wrongness, the points of view that we have, or at least that I had, were the things leading me astray.
It's our
When I actually,
choices that lead us astray.
yeah, and
That's what I was trying to say
look
before.
at,
Or talk myself in a corner.
well, and look at where you've been taught to choose from,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. And if we look at that, it's like, man, I look back on the education that I had, and I was like, the fact that I'm here now is a miracle.
And Onyx coming in hot again says surrendering to experience of all that was wrong to observing everything that was right. We are all beautiful miracles as all sentient beings of divine creation, worthy of all the beauties in life.
I agree with that
She's amazing.
100%. And, you know, and telling someone, man, you're a miracle, like you're just a miraculous creature, is, I know someone tells me that, unless I'm willing to acknowledge that in me, I'm rejecting it, you know. So
Mhm.
it's like, it's for each of us to, you're the only one that can know you're a gift. And
Mm.
that's, for me, like, man, I'll sit here easily with both of you and tell you all the shit that's been wrong with my life, or that I've done, that I've not liked myself for, or that I've, you know, all of that stuff. But for me to sit here and actually be present and vulnerable with the energy of, you know what, I'm also a gift, that I've that has been the hardest thing ever, you know, to
Mm.
actually have that degree of vulnerability with self, to be like, yeah, I've screwed up a lot of things, but I'm still here, you know. And all of the things that I've screwed up have all gotten me to here.
All right, if you're struggling with the substance use of a loved one or have tragically lost a loved one to substance related harms, reach out to Stronger Together Canada peer led support groups by Mums Stop the Harm. If you are in search of private inpatient addictions treatment, check out Prairie Sky Recovery Centre located in Leipzig, Saskatchewan. If you're looking for help with criminal record suspensions, the Elizabeth Fry Society of Saskatchewan covers all associated costs for women or gender diverse individuals to apply for criminal record suspensions. Reach out to Chelsea at 306-668-0635. To make contact or learn more about all of today's sponsors, to check out our new merch, or if you want to show us some love and buy us a coffee, all of those links are in the show notes below. How long have you been sober now?
I'm 2 years in April.
Congratulations.
Yep. You know, you asked that thing before, were you trying to kill yourself, or did you just not want to live? For me, the only way it works now is I gotta want to live, you know, like truly
Yeah.
live, not just
Hmm.
have a life, but actually live in gratitude, you know, be
Mm.
vulnerable, be kind, you know, in the world. And when I'm when I'm being me, and I think we can all relate to this with, in our own way, when I'm being me, everyone's included. When I'm being this personality that I created to feed my addiction, it's all about me,
Mm.
and no one's included.
Mm. Let's talk about the comfort zone. Something that you said a couple minutes ago, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but it made me want to ask you. You know, when you're here, when you're present, that your truth will make you lighter. Now, for a guy like me, and maybe this is just something that I need to work on, but I know, like, if I don't have a fire lit somewhere, like I almost need something pushing me forward. You know, like I need a problem to solve. I need a mountain to climb. I need a dragon to slay, type thing. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I would say it's something that you use as a way to create, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and it works for you.
Mm-hmm.
There's three elements with creation. Like, we're looking at, you know, creating your life. It starts with generative energy. which is that, the energy that you have with creation of ideas, the spark in you, the energy of that. Then it's creation, which is all about choice. Like, what choices do I make with this? What can I choose here what can I choose here? And then actualization, which is the bringing it into existence. So I would
Mm-hmm.
say, because uh, I think for a lot of us, um, well, I can definitely speak for myself, is if my once again, if I'm trying to make my life just about me, it's too small and it's not enough of that fire that you're talking about. I will find something to create a problem or create an issue or create an upset. But if I'm looking at more of, you're creating a lot with this. You've talked about, doing the different things and the contribution that you're being. I think it's amazing. We talk about great awareness with this is most people need to have at least 10 things going on at all times or they'll create crap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Focusing on one thing doesn't work for me. I need lots of things going on or I'm just not creative.
I mean, my greatest accomplishments in life are a direct result from me needing to put a fire out.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So,
Well, I remember I would facilitate these classes, conferences, and I'd be there facilitating people and changing lives, and I'd finish 3 or 4 days of this and people would just be blown away and so grateful and, and giving me praise and stuff. And I was just like, I had no ability to receive that at
mm,
all. And I had no willingness to actually create my life the way that I was being for other people. And I would do the same. Like I would, do these seminars and usually my world would expand or I would start having a lot more awareness of what is actually possible. That was one of my biggest triggers, because I didn't want to know I was that great. I remember meeting people who'd be like, man, you're awesome. And I'd just be like, who are you looking at?
mm-hmm,
I couldn't receive it at all because I wasn't willing to see me as that. I see a
mm-hmm.
lot of us with that point of view.
Mm.
Donna has a look of knowing on her face. She's bringing what she's bringing her truth.
I can relate to what you were just saying there because, like, when we do presentations, share our stories, and I have this hard time, I don't know, connecting in some way that whatever I'm saying is making some sort of difference. And Dan's always, for lack of better terminology, pumping my tires. And if it wasn't for him, I'd fade away into the shadows. I'm sure of it. But yeah, I mean, it's very interesting what you just said there about being, what was it, unable to accept?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah,
And
and
where
and
does
I
that stem
think,
from?
well, good question. It's like,
Yeah.
a lot of the programming and stuff that not only goes on with what you grow up with, but if we look at the reality that we live in, it's all about right and wrong and there's so many different elements of that, but we're not really taught to value our being.
Mm,
Like what if it wasn't so much about, what we say and getting it right? What if it was an acknowledgement of, what, it's who I be. And, like being you, like just being you and having that unique energy that you are is the gift in the world. For me, it's like I love being around kids because they don't tend to have the same rigidity and the fixed points of view and the judgments. So they're much easier to be around energetically. But notice when you're around somebody who if you've got someone in your life, like with you guys, like if you got each other where you don't have that judgment of each other, that's a gift.
Mm-hmm.
mm,
And and that's another thing that one of the things I see with addiction is addiction and receiving, they don't coexist. Like
mm,
actually having an ability to receive anything, because most of us are using it to escape anything
mm,
like that. So, for me, that's been a huge gift also is look kind of teaching myself to receive again, or
Mm.
actually receive. For me, there was many points where it you get it when you get it.
Mm.
So I would say, like, for someone listening to this, even struggling, like if they're struggling with addiction still right now, is okay, like, don't go into that wrongness of it. Recognize that there's some choices to make, but when you get it, you get it. And what if that was okay too? Like, what if we were a much easier on ourselves with this journey? And for me, it really is just one step in front of the other, one foot in front of the other, and recognize that you're not alone with it.
Mm.
There's many tools and there's many different things, and I'm so grateful for access because, like I said, the love AA, and I would highly recommend that to anyone who is desiring to get sober. But the thing that keeps me going is the creation of my life. So finding the tools for that, like where you can actually create a life and living that you love, you know, that's that, that's a gift. Because if
Mm-hmm.
for me, if I'm not creating that, I'm in kind of danger zone, I would call it.
Yeah. Where can people find you?
You can find me at my website, brendonwatt.com. I would highly suggest checking out accessconsciousness.com. There's thousands of facilitators around the world and so many YouTube videos and lots of different stuff, and it's really cool. So I would highly suggest checking that out.
All right, Brendon, thanks so much for joining us tonight. You certainly
Thank you both.
yeah, you blew my mind a little bit there.
Mhm.
Hopefully we can have you back again someday, a little bit down the road. I'm sure there'll be some new
That'd be
experiences to
awesome.
come. But for now,
Yeah,
that's it. Take care, my friend.
cool. Thanks. Thank you
Thanks,
both.
Brendon. Take care.
If you got something out of tonight's show and you're not yet subscribed to us on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell. We go live every Friday morning, every Sunday evening. We got lots of content for you to catch up on. That's all I got for you this week. Take care, my friends.
Say, this is Hard Knocks Talks.